Welcome again to this part. We were discussing about the Sultani and Mughal Muslim eras and the alternative dispute resolution. We concluded at certain point that there was less interruption by the central authorities uh, in the local administration in the panchayat system, and we further find that panchayat system was uninterruptedly functioning during those periods, although there was a counter narratives looking at the Mughal administration, where it has been doubted that whether local administration and local panchayat through dispute settlement mechanism was interrupted, perhaps because of the collection of more taxes. However, in all these periods, what we see is there was an interaction between the central administration with the locals for the several reasons we analyzed. So now we will be moving ahead to the British colonial period in the Indian subcontinent. So the East India Company, as you know, that it installed in Bengal, and it is understood the urge of erasing the power of local community and indigenous institutions in order to weaken the traditional system and spread influence of British regulation in the rural area. So this company was coming here to do business, and then they installed many of the development, many of the, I won't say development, many of the changes. So the new zamindari system was introduced by them, whereby they ruled and set up their agents to collect revenues. The Bengal regulations of 1772, 1780, and 1781 were designed to encourage arbitration. Again, these were some of the periods and some of the margins when we find a side of alternative dispute resolutions from the formal lens, from the formal system of governance. So Bengal Regulation Act 1772 and Bengal Regulation Act 1781 provides parties to submit the dispute to the arbitrator appointed after mutual agreement and whose verdict shall be binding on both the parties. The self-independent village administration system had been largely weakened by the introduction of permanent settlement in 1793. Moving ahead to the developments or changes. In 1870, the British government brought with the Chowkidari Act. It was for the purpose of maintaining law and order situation in the villages area with the help of chowkidars. The act prescribes for village panchayat, which is considered the emergence of existing local government. So basically, what the Britishers intending were to connect themselves with the local groups, communities, and thereby understanding the locals, and that will help them to continue and perpetuate their legacy. So the annual Bengal Administration Report of 1871, it prescribes that in the plains of Bengal, these institutions, means the Chowkidari system, the Panchayat system, these institutions seem to have been very much weakened, even anterior to British rule. And in the last 100 years of British rule and the Zamindari's theory of property, they have almost disappeared. So basically talking about the local ways of settling the disputes, the shalish mechanisms by the community headman or by the village leader. So these kind of systems were weakened when chowkidars were appointed and they were bestowed with certain functions. They somehow started behaving like the aliens, as part of or on behalf of the British people, on behalf of the British administration. So which was not a very common, or which was not the practice when Mughals or sultans used to administer. So the annual Bengal Administration Report of 1871 further says that Uh, it cannot be said that in the more important provinces of this administration there are absolutely no self-governing institutions. Some traces yet remain. Some things are in some places regulated by village panchayats and by headmen elders, but more and more the zamindari agents supplant the old model and the landlord takes the place of indigenous self-rule. So I I think what the report is trying to reflect is the dynamics changing powers from the village leaders, from the headmen, from the aged persons in the society to the zamindars who were given lands of the people and who then controlled those lands, and they started behaving like they were superior. And that's how the zamindars interrupted and installed a new mechanism of governance system where they took the rule of power and they continued it. In the alternative dispute resolution system, Indian Arbitration Act 1899 was the first substantive law on the subject of arbitration, but its application was limited to presidency towns of Kolkata, Bombay, and Madras. The Village Self-Government Act 1919 set up village-based courts and benches bestowed with the responsibility of dealing with petty offences and disputes at the village levels under the supervision of elected local representatives. The act introduced union board combining the function of both chowkidari panchayats and union committees. However, the authority of chowkidars to arrest persons committing cognizable offences and persons housebreaking implements or stolen property under the previous act would be continued under the authority of the union board. The president of the union board, to be selected from among the members of the board, had the power to deal with matters of petty civil and criminal cases. The provincial government was conferred discretion to constitute a union court having two or more members of the union board to settle minor offences. The act, in lieu of strengthening traditional village administration systems, imposed a system having little concern about the expectation and needs of common people. So, this Village Self Government Act is very important for us to realize and understand what the Britishers have done here. In its plain reading, one can easily find how the progress means formalization of local system. And this formalization local system posed several challenges if we analyze. And the challenges includes that the British administration had been capable to reach to the locals at the very root levels in the society. Secondly, these control or domination and thereby having people at the local level to look after the interest of the British administration is a continuous help for them to continue their administration. If you look at the law, it was made from the experiences they took from different movements in this part of the world. Particularly, most of the laws you will find after 1857 Sipahi Mutiny, uh, which resulted in the Britishers further thinking about perpetual ruling of the subcontinent. And that was one reason why they intended to spread their administration to different areas, including to the local communities. So the Village Self-Government Act, in spite of looking it as a very glamorous piece of legislation formalizing the informal system, it basically made locals a subject by giving some people a certain range of power within the formal system, and thereby creating the image that the justice delivery system can only be possible by the British administration. and the locals were not provided with the same kind of facilities, because the panchayats and the shalishdars remained beyond the law of this act. However, one can safely argue that in spite of all these efforts, the local traditional system of settlement of disputes remained a continuous process. Of course, there is no doubt that this process was interrupted largely and greatly by the or during the British administration. Uh, Another development was the Arbitration Act of 1940. After the Arbitration Act of 1899, with the new changes, bringing new dimensions in it, and that's how it was ruling. So, what we can find here during the British period is the formalization, an attempt of formalization of the informal system, bringing the local panchayat type system under the command and control of the central government, creating the local system as part of the central government, not just making a nexus, rather making it subordinate to the central government, and thereby, you know, uh, attempting to perpetuate their control. The informal panchayat system based resolutions are not recognized during these periods. Rather, the installation of Village Self Government Act, and before that, the Chowkidari Act, were some of the laws to indicating to install their favorable bodies within the local level. At the same time, these periods have experienced the emergence of arbitration, and on different occasions arbitration laws were made to make this mechanism and to effectivate the functions of arbitration, which we find from the lens of the history of ADR. So the rest we will be discussing in the next part. Thank you very much for listening to this.